Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and, of course, a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. This is Elizabeth Townsend Guard, your host, and I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School and a faculty fellow at the A.B. Friedman School of Business at Tulane. And I just want to quilt. So today we talked to one of our dear Quilting Army members, Meliane McNeill. She's awesome. She participates a lot and quilts, and her stuff is amazing. We talk about quilting. We talk about life. We talk about illness. It's a good one. So this is Meliane.
My name is Meliane McNeill, and I'm calling from Central Iowa.
Awesome. We've chatted many times. Some of them we've aired some of them, haven't we? We talk a lot, but how many have we aired stuff?
There have been. I don't think we talk as much as we scheduled to talk.
Yeah, I like that. Oh my gosh, it's so like that's the essence of my life. The people I'm close to, we talk about talking a lot.
Yeah. We've had 2 podcasts together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, and Meliane, like you're very active on the Facebook group, and I always appreciate you weighing in. You're like one of my barometers, and that your time and your thoughtfulness really matter to me, and I just appreciate you taking time out from your day to chat.
Well, you're welcome.
Cool. And you do medallion quilts, and as we were talking about before, I've gone down a rabbit hole of I'm a cultural historian by training. I've stayed away from quilt history for this whole project almost completely, and now I'm at a chapter. The whole reason the project started was the chapter I'm writing now, which is how do you understand when something's under copyright or in the public domain using repeating blocks. And so one of the things that I've been reading about are medallion quilts, and medallion quilts are something that's very dear to your heart, and you do amazing quilts. And I'm curious, how did that begin, and what do you think about your relationship with the past and the medallion quilt? So I wanted to understand how you feel about medallion quilts.
Sure. The first medallion quilts that I made actually were very, very early in my quilting. And I didn't know that there was a name for that style. I didn't know that there were things such as patterns. I designed the quilts myself. They were for my 2 oldest granddaughters, and I had found some pretty fabric with butterflies printed on it, and so I created a design with a big star, some type of a star in the center, and then arranged blocks around it and in borders. And as it turns out, a quilt with some central design in the center and borders around it is called a medallion quilt, but I didn't know that.
Right.
The woman who did the long arm quilting for me asked me whose pattern I used, and I didn't know what she meant because I didn't know that there were quilt patterns.
It's really great, right? So I love the beginning of things.
I stumbled into my first medallion quilts without knowing. I mean, that's how new I was. I was just thoroughly ignorant. I didn't know anything at all.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any sense of quilt history in any regard at that point, much less about medallion quilts. But since I have explored it quite a lot, both the history of it and also more contemporary techniques and strategies. So how do I feel about the history of it? It's for me is an essential part of understanding the design and improving my quality of design as I've gone through, is just taking a look at the whole history of quilting. Really includes that as the fundamental part of our quilt history.
Yeah.
Because if you think of the very beginning of using quilts as bed covering, and quilts weren't always used as bed covering. I mean, let's start with saying that. Quilts in the first place were probably more likely used to create clothing or to cover walls or window spaces for temperature control or that type of thing.
Yeah.
They weren't always used as bed covers, but as they have been, if you think back to like the Indian palanquins that were used as coverlets, that's really, I think the agreement by historians is that's pretty much where the beginnings of quilts as bed covers comes from, is from that notion of the design that you've got, this big central design of maybe a tree of life or something like that,
Right.
with some bordering around it, and that's the decorative aspect of it. But even if you're looking at whole cloth quilts that also are very, very, very early, generally speaking, we think of them much like a framed picture where you've got some central picture and then this frame around it. And in
Right.
fact, in the UK, I think that it's typical to call a medallion quilt a frame quilt. So that notion still continues even today. So,
yeah. So interesting.
as I studied them, though,
am I right that medallion quilts are, they precede they're like the early 1800s, they're really popular, but they are preceding the industrialization of fabric, and they're preceding the repeating block. Like these are like our earliest versions of quilts, besides whole cloth quilts, we see as medallion quilts, which is really interesting. That is so important to our root. And it's so interesting because we still have so many. I mean, then you jump back to the present, and I think about like panels that people buy, and like it's like a very, as you said, it was the first thing you did. Like these are very, like having something in the middle and then putting a bunch of borders around it is a really good place for people to begin. So it's interesting that our quilt history also begins very much with this. I mean, not our modern quilt history, I would say, or pre-modern quilt history has this as part of it, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I think that what you just said, though, there's a little bit of a problem with the idea of it being simple, because one of the problems that a lot of people have, or one of the reasons I think that a lot of people find medallion quilt making kind of intimidating, is because of the difficulty they have in getting things to fit smoothly.
Right, hugely.
If you're making a block quilt, you can make a block quilt, and either they're all the same kind of block, and so they're all going to be relatively close in sizing, right?
Right.
Or maybe it's an alternate block quilt, and you figure out some strategy for making your A block fit up to your B block, and it's going to be okay. It's going to work out pretty well either way. But with medallion quilt, when you have different frames or different borders that have different structure to them, wow, that can be much more difficult that way.
I mean, they get super complicated, right? And your stuff is beautiful, and it isn't like just like put a 2.5-inch strip around a panel all the time. They can be both the middle and the borders can be extraordinarily complicated. Now, have you developed strategies over the years to handle the complexity of getting the math right?
Yes, I have. Part of it is in knowing what things to make a fuss about and what not to, because to me, the most important thing is to make sure that it lies flat. So if you end up having if you find that your best way to fudge the sizing is to simply cut off the piece that's too long, you should go ahead and do that. It's okay. Unless it's a show quilt and somebody is gonna and it's important to you to be judged well. It's not important to have. It's not important if a small part of your last half square triangle has a blunt corner on it because you had to cut off that border to make it fit smooth and flat. It's okay. So that's one of my strategies, is figuring out where it's important to make that fuss and where it just isn't.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that.
But yeah, I do. I have more times than I would like to tell you. I've taken off borders because they just didn't. They weren't what I wanted.
Yeah.
Either the coloring was wrong, the value was wrong, the
Yeah.
sizing was wrong, it was just the proportion. I've taken strip borders and cut them in, already attached, and cut off half of them because they didn't do what I wanted.
Yeah.
There's a variety of different things, but yeah, I on my blog I have lots and lots and lots of lessons and tutorials on how to,
Right.
in particular, how to make things fit. So that's just a big strategic technique area where.
Right. And for people listening, can you remind me what your blog? Let's go to your blog.
Okay.
Is it Tell me. I think I know what it is, but tell me.
It's called Catbird.
Yeah.
Quilt Studio.
I thought I knew that.
Yeah. And the blog address is Catbird Quilts, all one word, Catbird Quilts.
Right.
.wordpress.com.
Right. Yes, I like that. I love the Catbird. So I think it's so interesting. I mean, I think that, do you feel like when you're creating a quilt, do you sketch it? Do you just use the fabric itself and experiment? I'm kind of in this space that I don't know, I feel like even when I sketch it or I design it, it doesn't seem quite right until I'm sewing it, and then I make a lot of changes. Does that make sense? Oh,
yeah. Yeah. I occasionally just go ahead and design something in like Electric Quilt EQ 7 or 8. I've got version 8 now.
Yeah.
I occasionally design something start to finish and make it almost exactly like it was designed. But in truth, those are the least satisfying, because really I'm more, I think what you just said is even if I've designed either the whole thing or parts of it ahead, when you're actually working with fabric, it just works differently.
It does.
And
it just feels different. Right.
The proportion might be different than what you thought it was going to look like, or the value that you chose for this versus that, the contrast might be wrong, or any number of reasons. So almost regardless, there's very few quilts that I make that I don't change stuff, even if I've started with designing it first.
Yeah.
But it's most fun to just start with, oh, hey, here's some great fabric, and I want to do this for the center. And then let's see, what will I do next?
Right. I don't know. It's fun. It just feels like, I guess it feels like a little bit of freedom. And we just got Quilt EQ8, and we've been talking to people about it. What role does EQ8 play in your sort of design process and your thinking process? Like, in what way do you use it as a tool?
For me, lots of times I just play. So I'm right now I'm not making very much. I'm still recovering from some medical stuff.
Yeah.
And again, if you want to talk about that, we can talk about that too. But so I'm not. My energy level isn't such that I'm making a lot right now. But I can still use the EQ to just try some ideas out, and maybe I'll make them someday, and maybe I won't. And either way is okay.
Yeah.
But as to making quilts, what I'm most likely to do with the medallion quilt is to go ahead and start like what I just suggested, which is to start with, I've got this great fabric, I have an idea, I want to go ahead and make some center motif. Mm-hmm. And I'll probably go ahead and then decide, well, after that, then I know that I want a ring of half square triangles, for instance, or whatever it might be. And I'll probably go out 2 or 3 different borders before I feel like, wow, now this thing is getting kind of big.
Yeah.
And not only is it big, but the next border, I have a good idea for it. But in truth, I know that idea might not work out. And the bigger it gets, the more investment there is into trying it as an experiment.
Yeah.
So at that point, typically, then I'll be using the EQ so that I can say, okay, now I think what I want here is I want to do an alternate block border with like push in the corner blocks.
Yeah.
And so I can draw that and go, oh man, the proportion on those is just completely wrong. And so instead, I need to use bigger pieces than that, and let me try hourglass blocks, which will give sort of the same effect, but with bigger pieces. Yeah. And so I'll try that and go, yeah, that works better. And let me play with where the color and value placement in those hourglass blocks is. So I can try a lot of different things without putting the investment into the time and the fabric of doing it in real life. And that's typically how I'll use it for my medallions.
Very interesting. One sort of related question. So you do lectures on history, and that's part of why I wanted to chat with you. How important do you think history, understanding the history of where things come from, how important is that for, as a quilter, sort of, it's played an important role in your life, but like what role does history play for quilting in general and for quilters, do you think?
I don't think that it needs to play a role in anybody's life in quilting.
Yeah. I
think that it does, whether they realize it or not, but I don't think that everybody has to find quilting history important.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
wish they did, but in truth, people will make, and people will make regardless of whether they know the background of what they're making.
Yeah.
I find that the maybe the more frustrating thing is when you've got some quilters, and we all are probably guilty of this to some extent, but there seems to be the belief that because I've never done this before, no one else has ever done this before either.
Uh-huh.
And so there's a little bit of vanity perhaps that we all can have about oh, look, this thing with 9 squares in it. I bet nobody's ever done this
ever. That's right. I mean, I think that's exactly right. Exactly. And then they're like, somebody stole my idea. Like, okay, right. First of all, it wasn't yours. Secondly, it's really basic. Right. So I think you're right. I mean, I think it comes into, if you're selling stuff and you're worried about your territory of like what's yours and what's not, then quilt history and what's come before matters, because you're putting yourself into a particular stream of commerce, and you should understand what that stream is and understand that you're not the first to create a medallion quilt, right? And that you can't lock it up, because many people have done them for many, many, many years, and it's just a motif that we all can use. So that part I find super interesting. That's what sort of started the project, is understanding that boundary between those things, and so interesting. Now, do you feel any kind of like, let's say you have tutorials and lessons and free designs and other things. Let's say, at what point would you be irritated? Like you have if you saw like your quilt somewhere, like what would you do? Like how irritated would you be, Like at what point does it matter to you, I guess?
It matters to me from the standpoint of mostly because there's absolutely no need to copy my quilt or your quilt or anyone else's quilt. No one needs to copy someone else's quilt. We all have capacity to do our own thing.
Yeah. Now,
that said, I've certainly made quilts that are like other people's quilts too, right? So if I have a quilt, one of the first quilts that I made is just particularly ugly because of the colors used. But I had a quilting magazine and was taken with the idea of making a quilt with all half square triangles, and didn't want to use the size that they did because, again, it wasn't clear to me that these things in the magazine were actually patterns. So I didn't learn how to read them right. So I just was like, so I could do this idea, and I could do that. So I did this idea with the half square triangles and arranged in the same value orientation as the picture in the magazine. And so I do that too. And there's been a few other quilts in my life that I've made that were because they looked like someone else's quilt. But in truth, I didn't do it like the one in the magazine. I didn't do it to the same size. I didn't use the same colors. I certainly wasn't trying to make it look exactly like that.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no need for anyone to make the same quilt someone else made, because there are an infinite number of colors out there, and we all can pick our own that we like best. And
right.
And if you can make a quilt out of half square triangles that are 3 inches, guess what? You could also make a quilt that was half square triangles that were 5 inches.
Yeah.
You know, you just don't need to do that. We all have the power to do something different.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, I don't know. As to the personal, the ego part of it, yeah, I'd be a bit torqued.
Yeah.
But I don't have a good way to express why, other than some sense of being ripped off, you know.
Yeah, it's like personhood. It's a sort of Lockean labor personhood theory of that you made it, it's yours, and somebody else is somehow. It's how like right of publicity started, right? Like you're not, and it was a privacy thing. You can't just take somebody's face and put it on flour, you know, like there's something in like in our DNA or in our, that we think that we create something and somehow that's ours, and that we should have the right to sort of decide what happens with it. I think that it comes from that kind of, again, John Locke a long time ago, right? So this kind of sense of I've mixed my creative labor with this fabric and made this, and so it's mine. And that somebody else has now taken my creative labor, and that doesn't seem fair. Yes. Yeah.
You explained it much better than I could.
That's because I have to, like over and over again. That's my job. So I appreciate that. Thank you. I worked like a decade to say those phrases to you. That's funny. So we had a conversation. We have 2 more topics I really want to get to. So I went to the public library twice, once in Illinois and once here recently. And I got really excited because it turns out they have lots of quilting books. So I posted that on our Facebook group, and I asked people if they go to the library and if they use library books. And so that got started, and I'm curious what your thoughts are about that. And then I've got a sort of a follow-up question. Also, the role of guild libraries. So we've been doing some research on does library exceptions apply to guild libraries? And I think they do, as long as guilds do a certain thing to do that. You know what I mean? Like there's a whole bunch of stuff the copyright law allows you to do if you're a library. And I think that talking to my library friend expert yesterday, guild libraries could count and have those protections, which is really interesting. Something I hadn't thought about.
Okay.
So, yeah. So tell me what your thoughts are about libraries, library books, quilting books. What role do they play in our world?
I don't know how much role they play for the average quilter these days, because people find so much online.
Yeah.
But for me, again, because I made my first quilt in 2003, and at the time there was not anywhere near as much internet presence of certainly ideas, technique information. There just wasn't that much available. Bonnie Hunter, Bonnie taught me how to quilt, basically, because she was one of the few great sources online of all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of people would tell you that, who's been quilting for very long. But for me, I used the library a lot to check out books, to understand ideas, to read about how to do things. And so I think that, given that was 15, 16 years ago, that made a big difference in my life, that I had some of those materials available. I don't know for the younger quilters or newer quilters who can find everything they want, and all the videos and all the tutorials and all the Instagram and all the everything. I don't know how much they use the library anymore. I don't really have any idea.
I don't either. What about guild libraries? Guilds buy books sometimes.
Yes.
Why? And what role do they play in sort of the culture of the guild, or what can we do with those books, do you think?
Yeah, I can only speak for my own, and I've been a guild member for about 12 years maybe, and they already had an active library when I started. there again, I checked out a lot of books from the Guild Library when I had that available to me. But I'm a member of a guild that's got something like 120 paid members. So it would be it would certainly be, a medium big guild. And we have about 300 items available to check out. The vast majority of those are books that are pattern and technique types of books. There are a few quilt-related novels. There are some templates, quilting marking templates and things like that. So a few other than some rulers, specialty rulers. But the vast majority of it is books. And it's actively used, I would say, any given month. When I was on the library committee, any given month, there might only be 3 or 4 different things checked out.
Yeah. And
so, it's not huge.
Yeah, it's not huge because we don't need them. Yeah, because we don't need them in the same way because of all the resources we have. That the library itself has kind of dwindled in terms of its needs. Right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, we do have. I mean, there are members who paw through the books every month.
Yeah.
Every guild meeting, and so I have to believe that there are people who are actively looking for information about. Oh, I need to make a graduation quilt for my grandson, and I don't have really good ideas of what to make for a young man. There's lots of pretty and floral and that type of thing. Or, but I don't know what to do for this kid who's 18 and played on the rugby. and so there's people who are looking for that type of information. And I think that we continue to serve that need because they aren't going to find everything they want at the public library, and certainly you can't find everything you want online either.
Yeah.
It's just, there's so much there, but it's not all there.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's really interesting. And it's interesting to think about because, again, I've been doing all this quilt history of tracking, like, books are one way to track our history. So we can look at,
Right.
Maria Webster. We can look at Angela Walters, right? Because the books will be there in a way, at least theoretically. And so I found that really interesting too, that I can check out books and see what was happening in the 80s or the 90s or the 1890s in ways that it's a lot harder to do, even with newspapers or online, right? There are tons of newspaper stuff, but the books that have the collection of newspapers are a lot easier to get to. Even though I have access to, I can go look at the original newspapers on a database at Tulane. I can do that, and I'm doing that. But there's something special about the book. The book preserves our culture in a way that it's a timestamp of what was happening in 2015 in a way that you don't get online, I think. I think that's the role of the book.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so it was kind of cool. And also, watching the techniques of how they change. I mean, the books themselves become irrelevant in some way, right? Because we have AccuQuilt or we have this or we have that. But it's really interesting to see the progress of what strategies are being used. So I don't know. It's cool too to see the technology changes in the books. And what when you don't have certain technology, what you need to do to make sure that you get it right, so. Right,
because I don't have AccuQuilt.
Right.
So I just have to cut stuff right myself.
Exactly. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? So, yeah, and it's funny because we've been doing a ton on technology, and I've really gone back to what I like the most right now is paper piecing a lot. I spend you can do it with your family. There's a way, the give of it is so nice, that there's a kind of, you can manipulate the fabric in ways that you can't when you're machine quilting. You've just got a more intimate relationship with that block. And it's interesting. So it makes me think back to, again, pre-sewing machine, times of, that part of it, your hands-on part is really interesting. So,
yeah, of course, when you say the pre-sewing machine, though, almost as long as people have been quilting in the U.S., we've had sewing machines.
That's true. It's very true. Sewing machine goes back quite a ways, and Singer, with their incredible marketing strategy, got those machines in people's houses in remarkable ways. And yet we see hand piecing continue throughout. Like, it isn't like everybody just abandoned hand piecing or paper piecing or hand applique. That all of these things exist concurrently, which is also really interesting. So, all right. So the other thing I wanted to ask you, and I don't want to get too personal, but I wanted to know, I know you've had some health issues, and everybody has health issues. Like, at some time in your life, either you or your family will have health issues. That's just part of being human. I'm curious about, and I have a chronically ill kid. I have health issues, many health issues throughout my life. And I'm curious what your and I feel like my relationship with quilting changes in a variety of ways, depending on sort of how my physical body and my mental health is doing. But tell me a little bit about your relationship. Like, how is having health struggles, has it altered your relationship with quilting, or how do you feel about quilting at the moment?
So at the end of February, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And very shortly after that, left town for 3 weeks to visit my son and his family.
That's nice.
And as soon as we got back, I had surgery, and then moved from surgery to recovery, and then into chemo, and now I'm in the midst of my radiation treatment. Mm-hmm. So pretty much my entire, the last 7 months basically have been devoted to specifically to my health care. Yeah. And I was trying to think of, from my Psych 101 freshman college class from eons ago, was it Maslow's hierarchy of needs? I mean, you take care of the stuff that needs to be taken care of. Totally. And then the other things that are more like luxuries, they just are going to have to wait until you've got more resources. Yep, I totally hear you. For me right now, the quilting is, and I'm fortunate in this way. The quilting for me is a luxury in a large way. Yeah. I know for some people, and for me at sometimes, it's been a necessity. It's been part of my actual mental health process, and so for me right now, that's not being the case. I'm not feeling like it's being a problem for me to not be quilting. Yeah. So I'm really fortunate in that regard, but it's also just not being my top priority. So I've actually this year, since coming back from my trip to see son and family, and since my surgery, I've actually made 4 quilt tops and their backs and their bindings, and so I have not been completely,
that's quite
absent
a lot
from it.
Right, that's quite a lot. But it's not like
it's quite a lot. I'm going to tell you more about that in just a moment. But it's not something. I am working on it, but it's just is a really low priority for me. And in particular, what I've found is that the things that I have made are really low level in terms of creativity for me. So I'm not doing anything new. I'm not doing anything very exciting. It's been a matter of just, cut, sew, press. Yeah. Sew, press, sew, cut. Right. It's just been a matter of construction and not much in the mental creativity aspect. So I just don't have mental energy to put into that right now.
And why do you continue? When you're like, I totally get that. I totally really get that. Why do you? What makes you want to you're not doing it for the creative outlook? Are you doing it for that construction or the soothingness of quilting? Like, what drives you to do the 4 quilts at this stage?
Yeah, I think just because I needed something to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I can sit here and in front of the computer all day, every day, and I do more of that than I should.
Yeah.
But some days I just can't bear that anymore either. And so, but my big problem right now is that now I've made 4 quilt tops that are fine.
Yeah.
But I'm not very excited about them, and I have no interest at all in making more quilt tops that I'm not very excited about.
Interesting.
But I don't have the real mental energy to do something that's more interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of stuck right now in this spot between the two.
Yeah, I get that. That's kind of an antsiness of like, I don't know. I mean, I can't tell. You know what I mean? Like there's a kind of funny, like when you don't feel good and that was enough. But now you're like, that's not enough. But I still don't feel good. Like there's a kind of like, now what do you do? My kid and I.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I get it. It's so interesting, isn't it? The whole like mind, body, creativity, production stuff is such an interesting area of like what you can and can't do, and when you feel well and when you don't, and again, having been chronically ill like my whole life, and my kid was on medical leave when she was a freshman in high school because of her illnesses, and so we talk a lot about this, and she does a lot of creative like for her it's writing and art, but there's an interesting thing of like this balance between having it be healing versus taking too much energy to even do. This really interesting relationship between art and health that is so many people have written about, but is really interesting when you're living it, and recognizing it. Yeah. So interesting. Well, thank you for sharing all that. I really appreciate that. That's a personal struggle, and I appreciate you sharing that with me and with others, because I think it's nice for people to hear that they're not on their own, that they all, and I also think we all go in and out of like, this is, unless it's your job, you don't have to do it, right? Like there's nobody saying, well, where's your quilt now, right? Like it's just for us.
Exactly.
So,
nobody's going to fire me because I didn't do something about that this year.
And I think sometimes we forget that. I think there's a sense of, my husband once asked me if I was training for the Quilt Olympics. And I was like, yeah, kind of. I don't know when they are or where they'd be, but yes, I do feel like I'm like in training for something that never is going to happen.
I have to be ready.
Yes, exactly. We'd be ready. We do need a Quilt Olympics. Can you make that half square triangle and like, speed versus, all that. So yeah. Anyway, silly things. Well, I really do appreciate you taking time to chat with us, and I love your voice. I love your work. I love being able to see you on Facebook. It makes my day, and you really are one of my great barometers of sort of, what we should be thinking about with this project. And so, it's very meaningful for you to spend time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, I love pushing you on what the heck are you doing anyway.
I know. That was so funny. It's so true. You're like one of the few people who keep me honest. I'm like, well, I don't know. You make me laugh
is it,
out loud.
Seriously, is it just for your own personal pleasure? Because that's okay if that's what it is.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I mean, that's the part that's interesting. It feels very much like an explorer and trying to get to the bottom of certain things. So I don't feel like I'm quilting every night just for my own joy. I mean, a little bit with the EPP. I'm really into EPP right now. But mostly because you can do it with your family, and that's kind of nice, that you're not just off by yourself. But I think there's more to it. I think I'm trying to understand something, and not just something for quilting, but what for this whole concept of the role of law and creativity. I think it really is the act of doing it and thinking about the law and thinking about how people react when I put something up out on a Facebook group and talking with people like this. It's just changing my whole feeling about copyright and what we do and who we are and a trademark. And I don't think that it would be the same project without you and others, and also doing it every night. The doing changes it, it really does.
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
I want to ask you now.
Yes.
So how has your opinion evolved over the last year and a half about how creativity and copyright? You just said that you feel like it's an evolving process for you.
I think I understand why the copyright law looks the way it does a little bit better. I think it makes more sense. I think the division between, say, an original work, a derivative work, and a transformative work, when you're making them, makes more sense. And there's more gaps. It's not, if I take your quilt pattern and I make it, it's not creating a derivative work, right? A derivative work is something that is recasting, transforming, changing it, and just changing the color of it, to me, doesn't seem like I've created anything that's protectable. So I think that there's problems with definitions in the Copyright Act that are really problematic, and I don't think I would have seen that as clearly without having experienced it, like what it counts as copyrightable. I think the system of trademark is super important to our world right now in a way that I wouldn't recognize. I don't know. There's like about 1,000 things. I've been writing all summer, so I've got like another chapter and a half to finish the draft. But it's of the paper and the book, and it's really all of this stuff, which is, this is what we know. Does it work when you're sewing something? Like when you're creating something, does this still hold true? And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So I think that it's been really interesting to think about, and what matters to industry, what doesn't, what matters to a regular person like me, and what doesn't. I don't know. It just is. It's a really in-depth kind of wandering through the creative process, which has been really fun. So, do
you feel like what you develop out of this is going to have any impact on the law and how the law is interpreted, or is it just?
Yeah, I hope so. So it's a duality. Well, it's three things. One, I think that like having conversations about copyright and other intellectual property as part of just a regular conversation like we're doing now helps people to feel comfortable with the law in a way I don't think they did before. Right? It's not separate from our lives. It's part of the underpinning of what we do every day. So I see that change. You see that on the website. On the Facebook page, like someone will post something and then like 5 people will be like, "Oh, that's for sale doctrine." And like, I'm like, how'd you know that? And they're like, "Oh, we listened to the podcast." And I was like, "Oh, that's so awesome." Right. I've seen the shift of like people recognizing kind of basic concepts, which is super great. And then they're telling their friends, and like, it's sort of changing culture a little bit, or making culture aware of what it was in the first place. So that's the first part. Second part is really talking to my colleagues and talking to the copyright, like my IP scholar friends, to be like, because they all do their program, they do stuff with theirs, right? People study clowns and tattoos and roller derby. Like that's what we do as IP scholars, is sort of do these in-depth studies right now. And so they're really interested in like what I'm finding, because it's such a weird, like there's craft beer, one's doing stuff about beer. Like that's a good one to try. So I think that's the big book I'm writing, is really talking back to the copyright community to say, this doesn't work, this does work, why does this look this way, and this is what we're finding. Then the third one is to have resources and like different levels of resources for people, so regular quilters, guilds, industry, professionals, so that they have access to real world understanding and solutions to the problems that they're facing. So it's a multi-tiered project, but it's really fun, and it takes up my whole thinking right now. And it really, my dad passed away unexpectedly, and he was always cranky and ill, but he unexpectedly, like I was like, that's not fair. Where's my cranky old man? Like I want him back. Like he was like I was really irritated that you wanted me to put your socks on like 5 times a day, but now I'm like, where's the guy, right? So, but he passed away, and I think it made me just sort of dive into things more. There's a kind of sense of like, that was my way of sort of dealing with trauma, was like just go further, and that was the quilt history. So I don't know, I'm just rambling, but I don't know. I'm just learning a ton. I feel like I'm overwhelmed by the amount I'm learning right now, and just trying to write as fast as I can to get stuff done and not forget it.
Yeah, I find that fascinating, because of course we all meaning everybody.
Yeah.
We all have some sense that there's this body of law that we may or may not know anything about, or we think we know things about, but maybe perhaps are more ignorant than we believe. And then that there are experts on it, and that those experts, if only they could, they would just tell us what we need to know, and then that would be it.
Yes. Well,
and
I mean, I think that's
what
that's probably true. I mean, the thing that's so interesting about it is, like, there's very few people who have, like, gone as deep. Like, I'm in the, like I need to be pulled out of this ridiculousness. But I think the goal for my goal, my next level of goal is to have, like, ways to communicate what I've learned either in simplistic manner, like very simple, like when can you copy something? Like when you go to the library, can you copy the book, right? Like basic stuff. But then also have a team of people. I keep calling them the copyright militia, which is really kind of funny because, the copyright police, right? But I want to train, like, to have our own sort of, police or militia force that actually can be out there with, like, the depth of knowledge when somebody asks a question to be able to answer it, right? To train people to be like, yes, well, here's the situation, and help explain it in a more significant way, because you have to understand the physics to understand the answer, right? And we're starting to see that on the Facebook group, but I would really like to be like, have a bunch of you all that are like answering it. I don't have to answer the questions. Like, I'm like, yes, I've trained them. They know their answers. But that you're also going out to the guilds and other places that are helping to understand what this ecosystem is, so that you can be more confident in what you should and shouldn't do, Or if you break the rules,
Yeah. I feel like we need to have a comic book version of the information.
Yes, well,
can you do that?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I've been talking to my kid. Like, she does, she does graphic novels and comic stuff, and I've told her I wanted this I wanted her to make me a dragon that's like a happy dragon and like a scared dragon, like anger dragon. So like as I'm writing, you can know like this is going to make the dragon angry. But yeah, I think that's kind of what we're trying to do for the very basic book is like very simple, like simple enough that you can get the answer, but not too simple that it's stupid. And sort of that's what we're trying to do this weekend is try to do that first. Ricardo's writing with me, one of my students who's now graduated, and we're both trying to see which one's better at the end of the weekend. I have to do one on trademark. He's doing one on patents, like a chapter. So yeah, that's kind of the idea, is to have these units of study, a super basic book for people that just want to know, like, just like the regular quilter who's like, am I allowed to make a photocopy? That's fine. But then people that are more a little deeper than that, and sort of thinking through how to do that so that it's empowering. Yeah, so that's right where we are. So, and then there's all the other ridiculous things. So we have to figure out how to raise money for this project. And I'm not very good at the whole money part. I'm always like, I'm a scholar. I'm like, I want to disseminate things for free all the time. And so my dean and the school is like, yeah, but you have to be self-sufficient by 2020. I'm like, okay, great. I'm like, okay, we will try, because we keep asking for lots of money. And so we were thinking about doing this thing in June where we bring people in as a fundraiser. So you would stay at the dorms, and then we would get tons of sponsorship, hopefully, and there would be a fee to come, but that fee would be coming for programming, so that we would be able to make our budget there. And then that would really help, so that we can sort of know that, like, every June, those 4 days, we try to raise as much money in every way possible, and then we know what our budget is for the year. So that's one of the ways that allows us a little more freedom to put out things for free or do things at very low cost, because we know we've covered our costs, and we can, so I don't know. It's just the money part is always the hard part, and I don't really want to, I'd rather just, be handed money from the provost.
Right.
That's not going to happen. Like at some point they're like, okay, I need to be self-sufficient. So I don't know.
When I did investment management, one of the things that we always were doing was sticking out our hands in front of people and saying, here, give me your money and trust me that I'm going to do the right thing with it.
Right.
And if you are fundraising for any organization or any project, it's the same thing, that they have to trust that your plan is a solid plan that's going to make it worth their investment.
Yeah, exactly. And so what we're trying to do with this adventure is that, you know, you would pay for a retreat or a class normally. It's just that we're doing it in a way that we can have a little pot of money so that when I go to Houston, I can take a student with me, or when, you know, there's a, you know, it's just the regular stupid thing, you know, like if we're going to have T-shirts, we have to prepay for them, or if we want to give out T-shirts, we have to cover it. So we're just trying to figure out how to, you know, we're not trying to get rich, that's for sure. We're just trying to be able to play some more, and I like sending gifts to people, and I like sending people on adventure, and so you have to have a bit of money to be able to do that. We sent 5 people to Paducah one year to experience it, because I couldn't. Again, my kid was sick, so I couldn't go, but they went, and that was awesome. So I mean, I think it's just thinking through how to have a little bit of play money, so and regular money, right? The podcast costs money to do certain things, so we're just working on it, but I don't know, experiencing things. But you are funny. You make me laugh all the time, because you know it's that you're like my inner voice, but you're just across the way, because you say stuff and I'm like, yeah, I've been thinking about that. Like, you know, you're like, yeah, you'll say something, I'm like, yeah, that is so very true. You know, like, it makes me laugh. You make me laugh out loud when I read your comments. So
every now and then when I get a little bit sharp or snotty with someone, it's okay.
Oh, yes. I think it's so funny. I mean, if it isn't, I'll be, I always like, no, I think you're funny, and I think it's great. I mean, we care about kindness, but sometimes you need to be a little bit, a little bit more stern. But that I think there was maybe one time when you and I chatted about something just because I worried about how the person was going to feel. But I think that we're having honest conversations, and they're coming from a good place. And I know it's coming from a good place from you. You're not trying to be mean or cruel. You're just observing something. And as I said, you are my barometer. Like, I know there's like 3 of you. And like when you say something, every time when you post, I'm watching and listening, because I know when you post that there's probably something I need to be aware of. So I think it's a delight to have you part of my life and part of this project. It means a lot. As I said before, it's not that I mean it very sincerely. And I hope you keep working, like keep posting, because you do make me laugh. You were so funny that last one. You were like, what is your point to all of this? I'm like, I don't know. You sent me into a spiral that I almost had to delete, because I was like, it's like you're my therapist or something. I was like, or my mom or my best friend. Like, you push me in ways that I'm like, oh crap, right? Like, I think I got to think this through, So you make me laugh, Melanie. You really do.
I've told you before that if you ever want an opinion, just let me know, because I probably have one. I
like it. I really do like that. It makes me my heart very happy. Well, I wish you the best, and thank you for sharing. Thank you for being a little bit annoying. No, I'm just kidding. Like, sometimes I'm like, oh no, it's so true. Now I have to deal with this. I wanted to go to bed, but. Cheryl Slapodic, so Cheryl's so good to this project, and she I stayed with her after my dad passed away for about a week, because it's the whole thing. My kid was in Chicago, and I didn't want to leave her, and so I went to Cheryl's house, and she said, come stay here. So and I was really a mess. I was like such a mess. I was just like I was broken. I was super broken. But then she was like, when you write "it depends" on, like, somebody will say, like, what is da-da-da-da? She's like, nobody knows what that means. I'm like, well, it just means I'm tired. I want to go to bed. She's like, you have to answer the question, because people don't understand that "it depends" equals I'm really tired and I cannot deal with answering this question. So I'm trying to be better about it, but she really got on me. She's like, people think that it's okay then that they can have any answer they want. I was like, no, there's an answer. There's always an answer. It's just like, I'm hungry, or I'm really tired, or I need to go feed the cats, or whatever. So anyway. Well, I adore you.
Are you sure you want to air this interview?
Yes, no, I'm cool with it. People share. I mean, I don't usually. I mean, it's all good. I'll probably listen to it and be like, oh no. Every once in a while, I make my kid listen to it. I'm like, is this too weird? She's like, whatever. It's Saturday. And we are...
You know what? It's all okay.
It is all okay. It doesn't matter, right? We live in a kind of authentic world now. So, I mean, authenticity is good. But remember when we used to have to be like a certain thing? Did you feel that way when you were younger? Like you had to be something and you had to look a certain way and you had to fit in. I think that's the joy of being older. At least I did. I was a super shy, uncomfortable child who felt like, I don't know. You probably weren't. You probably were like just strong and like telling people what they thought from the beginning. Were you that way?
I think I probably often told people what I thought, whether they wanted to know or not.
Yeah. My kids like that. I think I really admire that because I think that you get the honest. It's not out of cruelty. I think it's out of honesty. And there's a kind of like, you trust that person, right? Because they're going to tell you the truth. And so you may not like it, but it isn't like when you're that kind of person, when you're really telling somebody like, because it's coming from a place of honesty and really what you feel, and it's not out of cruelty, it's really amazing. And I think it took me...
honestly,
yeah.
You know, I really feel like you just caught me completely.
Yeah.
Because that just, you know, that is the way I try to be, is I try to not be mean to people, but I don't have a good poker face, and I never did.
Yeah.
And if you want to know what I think about something, if you don't want to know what I think about something, you better not ask me, because I will almost for sure tell you.
Right. You
know.
And I think that is a huge asset. I mean, I really do. I think that, and if people recognize that, like, you know, sometimes people just want you to say nice things, and, you know, that's okay too. I think I was such a shy kid, I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I think now I just feel like I just know I'm a goofball and I'm just going to do whatever I'm doing, and then people can like it or not like it. But it took me to like age 50 to feel like I could be that thing. So, you know, just takes time. You know, I don't know. Life is complicated.
Gosh, I just feel like being a little older is just such a huge advantage.
Right? It's great,
you know?
Isn't it? I love being this age. This is my favorite age. Like maybe 6 years old, then 50, 51, 52. You know? I don't know.
Exactly.
Right? I don't know. Yeah, maybe that's why quilting's so cool, because we're all at a certain place that we're like, whatever. I'm just going to be my weird thing, you know? I'm just going to be who I am, and like, whatever.
But Elizabeth, not everybody is there, and that's the part, I guess, I was saying earlier, is there's no reason for everybody to make the same quilt.
Yeah,
you know, you just don't have to do that, because there's a million quilts. There's an infinite number of quilts we can make.
Yeah.
And so just do your own thing. And people are, even so with that, people are just so afraid to do that. And that's the part that honestly I just find really, really sad for the people who don't feel comfortable in doing that themselves. And I've probably said this before, but you know, as I think more about it, I feel like that's kind of selfish of me to feel that way, because I could go to the store and look for a greeting card, and I might find the greeting card that says just what I want to say, right?
Yeah, right.
And I don't necessarily think twice about buying the greeting card to express for me the way I feel, and yet somehow I have this weird snobbish feeling that people shouldn't want to, you know, use someone else's pattern that expresses how they feel about whatever.
Yeah.
And so
I get it.
I'm not completely confident that that's, you know, a good way to be.
Well, it's so funny
because at the same time, that's my overall feeling, is that people should just feel comfortable to just be themselves and do what they want.
I'm kind of getting into this mode because people have been doing this green project, and they keep we send them fabric, they send stuff back, and it's so insanely cool. And I always just want to like wrap myself in the quilts or make that quilt. Like, I think it's a desire to like, oh, that is so amazing. I want to feel what that is to be that amazing. So I think there could be something in that if you are overtly saying, I want to do a puzzle quilt, I want to take that quilt that you made and make it in the exact same fabric and the exact same everything, because I just want to feel what it is to make that thing, as opposed to I want a creative process. I want to be inspired. I want to make my thing my thing. I think they're really two very separate ways of feeling about quilting. I know my mom was very much the puzzle quilter. She was like, I have no creativity, she would say. And she just wanted a pattern to follow. And she wanted to do it exactly the way the pattern was. And I think that's all, as you said, I think it's all okay. I think recognizing who you are and being okay with it is good. And then striving to be whatever you want to be as well. But, it's all fun. It all should be fun. Everything else is kind of dreary, housework and all that.
Oh, yeah. So. It's the creating that is where the satisfaction comes from.
I think so.
I mean, if you're a cook and you follow a recipe and make something that's amazing and wonderful and people enjoy it, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, as always, I adore you. It's hard to end this conversation. I do wish you the best, and anything I can do, let me know. I just think you're awesome. You're great. You really are. It's just like such a dork.
It's a mutual admiration society.
That's really cool. If you come up with ideas of who we are and what we're supposed to be doing, will you let me know? I have this new ridiculous idea. Like all these people were like, well, we're trying to get rid of our books and stuff. So I feel like we should be rescuing quilt books and having a lending library through the Just Want to Quilt. So now that I know about like what we can do, the legal parts of like what I can and can't do with books, I'm like, let's just have everybody send their books here so we can create a lending library. Because the other thing is that the historical books are very hard to find. Like if you are trying to find them, you have to buy them on Amazon. And I just put in, I don't know if he'll do it, but I just asked the dean for I think $700 to buy 60 books off of Amazon. I don't know if he'll let me do it or not, but I thought well, when I'm done with them, I'm not going to care. What am I going to do with them? So we should have a lending library of people if they want to, I don't know. That's my latest idea.
Yeah. This is a fundraising idea for you.
Right.
I mean, you can do this, and you can have both lending and also resale of used books if people will just send you their old books.
Nice. Yes, they could mail them to us. That's right. That's very cool. We could do a whole resale thing. This is true. This is really good. Well, you have to help think that through, because I think that some people do want these older books, and they're not always hard to find, but they're expensive. If you really did want the whole shebang. It's going to cost about $1,200 is what I've learned. I've asked for $7 because I thought 12 was a little too much. But yeah, it's about $1,200 to buy all the books. So, all right. Well,
can I see your list?
It's the APSQ list. It's the appraisers list. So the idea is to read all of those, because that's what they think means that you are. I mean, plus a bunch of new ones, because the list doesn't have a lot on contemporary quilts and other things. So, adding a little bit more to that list. But yeah, when I have my list together, I'll totally post it for everyone. And then we'll have the books. So my thought is if somebody wants to do this book reading list, we'll have all of them, right? So you should be able to come and check them out. So we'll see. But yeah, it's their list of conservation and ethnic groups and quilt history and all of that, and then sort of seeing what else is out there that should be added to the list. Because for this chapter, the idea, this is what I said, this is my pitch to the dean, is that what I'm trying to understand is how do quilt historians and quilt appraisers think, what do they think their history is? And if we understand what their history is, what does it tell us about what's under copyright and what isn't? Because it'll help us understand sort of the what is considered like a motif or scenes of fair or whatever, and what isn't. But we have to understand how a culture interprets their history from the inside to be able to understand the legal significance of that from the outside. That's so that's the reason. So not just because I'm a lunatic, which that's probably true too. So that's it. All right. Well, I hope you have I hope you sent us a little quilt that you donated to us, and it sits outside my door on the wall, and so I see it every time I go to my office. So you are awesome, and I really do appreciate this time. And if you have other ideas or thoughts, let me know, because you do, and we're gonna be doing lots of things soon. So take care, and I do hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
So you've been listening to Just Want to Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School. And I'm Elizabeth Townsend Gard. If you like this podcast, keep listening. Also, we have a Facebook group. Come join us. We talk about a lot of things. We also have an Instagram account. And of course, most importantly, I really hope you get a chance to quilt today.